Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 146, Tell Your Mission Story with Isabella Beals. I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you are preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. I will help you step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am excited to share with you this conversation that I had with a gal that recently reached out to me, and her name is Isabella Beals, and she is working on putting together a play all about missionary work. She is studying theater at BYU, and I was really interested in the idea of her coming on the podcast and her asking me the questions that she wanted to ask me, but then we could record it and then share it with all of you. So I'm excited to share that with you here shortly. And we kind of talk more about it. Also, in there, I talk about a link that you can go click on to fill out her survey. She is trying to gather as many mission stories as possible, either preparing, currently serving, returned missionaries, anyone who served as a service mission, as a mission leader, anybody who is a performing missionary. What you have a story to tell. All of us have a mission story, and we kind of talk about that in the episode. But I'm going to include that link in the show notes so that you can click that and go help her out and fill out your information and tell your story. So before we cut to that interview, though, I do want to remind you that there's about 10 more days to get my birthday discount on Mission Prep Plus, which is a buy one, get one free. So grab a friend, come join Mission Prep Plus. I only run a discount about once a year to kind of kick off the summer, celebrate my birthday. And there's so many of you that are leaving in the next little bit. So go either to the website, jennydildine.com, and check out Mission Prep Plus. And one of the really fun features that I haven't talked about as much is that you'll get ongoing email support from me and my team for the rest of your entire mission. Kind of a cool thing, and as long as you need it after you come home. And all kinds of other fun features. It's not in person. We're not in person. We'll be on Zoom, just like the online MTC, but we will be face-to-face live classes. So all of that information, jennydildine.com, click on the Preparing Missionary drop-down tab, or if you have any other specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, jenny@jennydildine.com. So without further ado, I'm going to let you learn all of the fun things from Isabella about this project and what she is about to do. And then she is going to ask me some questions. So I hope you enjoy. Hey, I am so excited to have Isabella Beals here on the podcast today. And she and I have been emailing back and forth a little bit. And she is a student at BYU, graduating this spring. And she is part of the theater department there at BYU. And what is your degree that you're working to get?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a theater arts major and then a psychology and music minor. So
Cool.
all over, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a theater girl myself. Have we already talked about this?
No, we haven't. So tell me more. Yeah,
I was the lead in my high school musical.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really
What
fun.
musical? Yeah.
So have you heard of the Fantastics? It's like,
Oh, yes, I have actually.
uh,
Yeah, I've sung a couple songs from the show actually. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I was Louisa in the Fantastics. So
That's
theater
awesome.
has always been close to my heart for sure. And even now, like I can't really go to musical theater, any kind of theater kind of thing without like crying in the opening act.
Right. Absolutely. It has that effect on you. It does that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very powerful medium. Anyway, so I was super interested when Isabella reached out and was like, hey, I'm working on this project. I want to create a play about missionaries and things like that. And she asked if she could come on and ask me some questions about like the work that I've been doing with missionaries and things like that to add into her play. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and then tell us a little bit more about your project and like where you see it going and what you hope it will accomplish. And then we're going to kind of flip the tables. Usually I'm the one asking the questions on this podcast, but I told Isabella I thought it might be really fun for her to ask me the questions that she wants to know. And then we can just have a conversation that way and kind of see what comes out of it. I think it could be really fun. So
Awesome. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. This is such a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So thank you. Yeah, so my name is Isabella. I am getting ready, like Jenny said, to graduate from the theater department at BYU this April. I grew up loving to do theater and really falling in love with even this power we were just talking about, the emotional impact that theater can have, and have kind of thought for a really long time, like there's something to that. There's even something spiritual about that when we can tap into that creative power in a very creative and expressive medium that way. So about back in January, I just kept getting this prompting and this thought of, you know what, I really love missionaries and I love missionary work. I work right now as a teacher at the MTC, teaching Albanian speaking missionaries. I served my mission in Albania from 2018 to 2020. And I loved my mission, and my mission was the hardest thing I've ever done. And so I think for me, coming back over the last couple of years, trying to understand what was so great and also sometimes what was so hard about missions. I think I've spent a lot of time figuring that out, trying to teach other missionaries how to feel prepared and excited while also balancing, hey, this is going to be a lot. And back in January, I kind of had this prompting and this thought of, you love theater and you love missionaries. What would happen if we tried to tell a story about those things together? So I started following that prompting, reaching out to missionaries that I knew that had experiences and just asking them, hey, could I interview you? Could I get your mission story? I just would love to hear from your point of view. Why did you serve a mission? What was so important about it? And what is still important about it to you? What was great? What was hard? And it's just been awesome to get all these stories, to get all these interviews, and just really and truly every single person of our faith tradition has a mission story, whatever that looks like, whether they served a full-time mission, a service mission, a performing mission, a senior couples mission, or whether they have found themselves engaged in missionary work in other ways. I've met some people that will share those stories as well. And it's just been amazing to see how the Lord really is doing missionary work in the hearts of every single one of his kids. And so that's the goal, is to put a play together with all of these missionary stories, put it up on stage and give other people the chance to come watch a powerful piece of theater and think, wow, what was great about my mission? And also maybe what stories have I not visited for a while? What's maybe still uncomfortable or hard about a mission? And what can I do to process that and to tell my story and to move forward with nothing but love and joy for my mission? So that's a little bit of the goal of what I'm trying to do, and where I hope this goes in the long run, is giving more people the chance to think about, what is my mission story?
that's amazing. And I totally agree. We were chatting a little bit before we hit record about how I totally agree with you that everybody, especially in our faith tradition, is connected in some form or fashion to missionary work. And whether you have a grandchild, whether you have a child, whether you're a missionary yourself, whether you served a long time ago, um, it just affects so many of us. And we were kind of talking about how it's interesting because it's this interesting idea is that we talk a lot about missions because everybody seems to be on one, but then we don't really talk about missions.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I suspect is because it feels like such a short time. It's almost like a missionary goes, maybe they struggle a bit, then they're home, and then they just move on. And so that little tiny piece of their life feels um yeah, like they've moved on, or it's not it doesn't have to impact me now or something like that. But um I love the idea of talking more about it and about the experiences that people have and the stories that they have, because everybody has one.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just giving people the chance to so unapologetically like continue to unpack their mission experience, 5, 10, 20, 50 years later. We
Mhm.
talk in the church all the time about how a mission, even though it is for such a short time, can impact your life for the
Mhm.
rest of your life. And I hope that what this work does is it gives anybody who has ever had a mission experience of any kind, a mission story of any kind, take a second after they leave the theater and go, yeah, I should revisit that. There's still more I can learn from that. There's still more that God is teaching me, even though this singular experience may have happened in the past and it may have been a long time ago. You know, God is a miraculous God. He teaches us the same from the same experience for a really long time. And so, yeah, I hope that's what this does for people too.
Awesome. I love it so much. Um, okay, should we get going with so
Let's do it.
I'm gonna include, I know that Isabella had asked if she could send her survey to all of you. And so we're totally gonna do that. I'll include that in the show notes, the survey. Um, and if you've been on a mission, what's kind of like any kind of mission, what would be the parameters for that, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just for anybody that has feels like they've been involved in missionary work of any kind. And I've set up the survey so you can, I hope, no matter what your experience is, you feel represented. So if you've served a service mission, a performing mission, a senior couple mission, if you're the family member of a missionary, and you want to talk about how missionary work, LDS missionary work has impacted your life, then I want you to take this survey. I just want to hear what people's experiences are with missionary work and put as many stories as possible into this play because this is all of our story. Missionary work is all of God's children's story. And so I'm trying to get as many responses as possible. And I would love if anybody who wants to talk about missionary work would take a few minutes and take this survey.
Well, what do you think about like mission leaders or mission presidents? Because some of them have,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be amazing. Yeah, mission leaders. I actually haven't, I've tried to set up a couple interviews with mission leaders and haven't had the chance yet. I would love as many mission leaders as possible to take this as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll make sure we do that. And
Right.
then I was just thinking, yeah, originally when she reached out, she was like, will you fill out this survey or could we hop on an interview? And I'm like, an interview sounds fun. Let's do it. So
Awesome.
I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I originally reached out to you, Jenny, just because I'm a super big fan of the work that you do. I have kind of followed your podcast and social media for several months now, and I just am super impressed and super touched by the work that you do with missionaries as well. And so today, I would just love to hear more about your individual experience with this particular line of work of trying to be like a life coach for missionaries and what that looks like. I think that is a beautiful story to tell. So I'm super excited to get to know a little bit more about you in this story today. So kind of my first question, actually, I would love to hear, just kind of from you in this moment, what comes to mind of how did your story of helping missionaries in this way get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I feel like originally what happened is my son went on his mission. My oldest son went on his mission. And that was really like, I was actually just talking to my sister about this because her son just got his mission call yesterday. And we
Wow.
were actually just texting this morning about, I'm like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And she's like, I go from really excited to full of grief. And I actually think I need to record a podcast about this, about the grief we feel when a missionary leaves as family members.
Absolutely.
Um, anyway, so I guess that is sort of the experience I was having as I didn't expect that I would feel all of the feelings that I felt. I didn't expect that I would miss him so much. So there was all this stuff that I was sort of trying to figure out and process it was the same time that my youngest daughter she started kindergarten, so I started really questioning like, wait, now my kids are leaving. I'm not going to see my son for 2 years. Now my daughter is growing up too, like my youngest is not a baby anymore. And I really came to life coaching because it's something that I needed. It's because I was having a hard time figuring out here. I had raised these kids to do what I wanted them to do and like hoped for them to do. And now, like, now what? It's kind of how I felt. And I remember distinctly, I'm sure I've told this on one of my podcasts at some point, but I remember distinctly I was crying in the bathroom one morning, and my husband was there, and I just like, I don't know what to do with my life. I just don't know. I don't know what's next. I don't know what to do with my life. And like, just coincidentally, he just said, well, maybe you need a life coach.
Mhm.
And not because he even knew what that meant or because he understood like the ramifications of what that was, but
Yeah,
it was like, I need help. In his mind, it was like, I need help with my life. So I need a life coach, right?
sure. Absolutely.
So that's how I originally came to life coaching. And then I got certified, and I've gotten a couple other like additional certifications since then in trauma and faith-based coaching and things like that. Um, but it was around the time that I wrapped up my certification and kind of was on this life coaching journey that that same son was coming home. And my other son, my next son, had his mission call getting ready to go out. And what I started noticing with my son, my oldest son, is just this sense of dread,
Mm.
sort of like pervasive in his letters. It was like he felt, interestingly, the same way I had felt when he left, which is like, I don't know what's next. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know, um, like his confidence, even though he's sort of like this amazing missionary, you could see his confidence like starting to wane. And
Yeah.
anyway, so I just sort of had this moment where I was like, wait a second, I think this could help. I think the things that I've learned over the last year, 2 years could really help and make an impact for returning missionaries. And what I started realizing is that we had worked our whole life, many families and missionaries themselves work their whole lives. We sing it at a very young age. I hope they call me on a mission, and I hope by then I will be ready. So we work on that and we talk about it and we plan for it. And then when we get home, it's sort of like we just get dropped a little bit, I think is how many returned missionaries feel. And I realized that we never teach these young adults how to come home. Like, and it is a very literal change and transformation that's happened in your brain and in your body and your emotions and the experience you've had. So it does require some skill and some transition, like skills to get through that. So that's actually where I started, was in the return missionary space. And of course, the more I worked there, the more I had moms reaching out to me saying, hey, my son or daughter is really like doing a nosedive on the mission. Can you help? And so I started working with missionaries on the mission one-on-one. And then I guess where my heart finally came to, and it did take some time, was, man, if we could help kids before they leave, if they had these mental and emotional tools before they left, how different the experience would be on the mission. And not only that, how much it would change their navigation of the post-mission experience. It would be night and day. And that is what I have found. And I am sure you can imagine, it's like this ripple sort of effect that happens. And I've heard of like mission presidents like teaching certain concepts like at a zone conference. And I've heard of like some of my clients teaching something in a district meeting, and how it slowly is helping and changing and shifting. If I had to describe the work I do, it is slowly shifting and changing the way these missionaries and return missionaries see God, the way
Mhm.
they see their lives, and the way they see themselves. And that is powerful work to do. And all throughout the process, I really have felt, I mean, I don't speak of this very often, but I have felt sort of this pull to just keep going, that this matters, just keep going, just keep, because I have bad days where I'm like, I don't even know if this matters. Is
Sure.
anyone listening? Like, does anyone care? I have days like that, but I have still continued to just feel this pull, like keep going, keep going. This matters, keep going. One missionary at a time.
That's amazing. And so clearly needed, as it seems like you have continued to find in all the stages of this work that you've talked about, both before, during, and after the mission. Um, we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, but I just think there's maybe some of those conversations or even some of those life skills that, like you said, they're just not taught very often. And So to have such a serious focus on teaching those coping skills and those emotional well-being skills to missionaries in particular, like that just feels like such a niche thing. And yet, I think it goes back to this idea of it's the story we're not telling about this story that we're all a part of.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
just amazing. Yeah. You made this really interesting comment of if I could describe the work that I do, I would say it's helping missionaries change the way they see God, they see their lives, and they see themselves. And I'm wondering if you can maybe expand a little bit about each of those three things as much as you'd like to. Like, how do you feel like these missionaries are changing the way they see God and their lives and themselves? Like, what is the change there that needs to happen?
Mm. Yeah. So one of the things that I find becomes problematic on the mission is I think we sort of go into it thinking that I think we understand like that it's going to be hard. We understand maybe we're going to experience some anxiety, we're going to experience some loneliness, we're going to maybe experience some homesickness or depression. I think we all sort of like understand that. But what I've noticed is when missionaries get out there, they sort of think that if they're experiencing something that is just a human experience, like anxiety or discouragement, or even just like being totally bugged by a companion, right? Just like,
Yeah.
I can't even with this person, right?
Right. Yeah.
They add this level of like meaning to it that somehow that means I'm doing something wrong, or somehow that means maybe I'm not I don't have as much access to the spirit, or maybe like God's disappointed in the way that I'm showing up. Sometimes I've even heard it go so far as to like, because I feel these human emotions is the reason I'm not getting baptisms, is the reason that that lesson didn't go very well. And when we say that out loud, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Right.
It's sort of like, I don't know if it's just the way we were sort of raised, like we're all raised, we live after the manner of happiness. And so, like,
Yeah,
if we're quote unquote on the right path or like doing quote unquote the right things, then we're going to feel happy.
sure.
When we don't feel those feelings, what I see most often on the mission is like, whoa, wait a second, there's something wrong with me. So, what does that have to do with God? I believe that God sent us here to feel all of the emotions. I
Hmm.
actually had a missionary, I've heard missionaries say things like, well, I know God doesn't want me to feel sad. And I'm like, wait a second, are you
Hmm.
sure?
Let's challenge that for just a second. Yeah, yeah.
What's true is without sadness,
Hmm.
there is no happiness, period.
Hmm.
We have to have both. And when I think about the scripture, I used to think like the scripture that talks about opposition in all things. I used to believe that was like Satan like opposing us and fighting us and all of that. And now what I really believe about that is opposing just means like emotions that balance each other out. I think it was Alma the younger that talks about like um never such like exquisite was my pain as never as like as marvelous as my joy was. And you probably know the scripture way better than me.
No, you're great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
But it's like in a balanced, we can't experience one without the other, and the same as happiness and sadness. So, what I really feel is like maybe on the mission, we have misunderstood how God sees us, first of all, that He is like here for all of us, that He trusts us, that He understands we're supposed to have like highs and lows, and we're supposed to feel doubt, and we're supposed to feel sad, and we're supposed to feel anxious. That's part of being human, because without those emotions, we wouldn't even know what peace was. We wouldn't even know what certainty was. I don't think he's disappointed in any of us, actually. I think he trusts us. I think he sees us as creators. I think sometimes on the mission, we think we can get something wrong. Like we'll hear missionaries say, um, I worry I'm a bad missionary.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that's a thing. I think God sent each of us into our different capacities to do what we're supposed to do because we're the best person that can do it and we can't do it wrong. And I don't think like he watches us on our missions or after our missions, and he's up there going, and our heavenly parents are up there going like, oh my gosh, I hope they get it right. Like, I hope they don't mess this up.
Right.
I think they're like, yeah, you go get them, Isabella. Just get them. You go. I can't wait to see what you create.
That's amazing and truly, truly profound. Even just as we're sitting here talking, I'm thinking back to my mission and some of the feelings you described and talked about of like, we feel like, you know, just by feeling these emotions, we've done something wrong. And I remember thinking that as a missionary a lot. I think I still deal with that sometimes as a kind of ripple effect from the mission. And it's so interesting to try and figure out how to rewire that relationship with God and to train ourselves to think a little bit more about the God that you just described so beautifully, the God that isn't up there, our heavenly parents aren't up there just biting their nails, hoping all the time that we will figure it out eventually, but rather they're sitting there with us every step of the way and empowering us to feel the entire spectrum of emotion and to figure out by experience, right? That's why we're here on this earth too, is to live by experience. And that's amazing. I would love to hear, like, specifically a little bit more about in the work that you do, how do you do that? Like, what do we do to help change that mindset a little bit more as you're coaching missionaries? What are some of the things that you suggest to help that perspective change a little bit?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So it's definitely a process. Like, so my preparing missionary program that I have, it's much like the MTC, but for all for your mental and emotional health. We do it all on Zoom, just like the home MTC. That's 10 sessions.
Okay.
And we meet over 2 weeks, and all of my one-on-one coaching is 10 sessions. But let's see, if I had to boil it down, I think in session 2, we talk a lot about becoming the compassionate watcher of our thoughts. And, I think many of us would say like there's wrong thoughts to think, but when we really understand like the way that our human brain just works automatically to it's actually a protective mechanism to like avoid any sort of like harm or danger, it automatically defaults to negativity. So if anybody's listening is like, oh, I shouldn't be thinking negative, well, yeah, I mean that's just what your brain does, right? So the
Sure.
first thing is just like learning how to observe our own thinking with compassion. And so that's a lot of the work is just like how to first of all become aware that we can even observe our thinking. Second of all, how do we add a lot of love and compassion into that? um One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently is because I'm going to go speak to a group of young adults at Utah State,
Oh,
uh,
very cool.
a young women's group, the Relief Society group there.
Awesome.
And so that's been on my mind a lot. And um, one of the things I've been thinking about is I think as missionaries, we understand like a lot about Jesus, and that if we're going back to like how our relationships with the world or other people are changed is on the mission is because we start to really understand how Jesus was with other people.
Hmm.
But I've come to feel for myself, and I don't know if this resonates with you, but one of the reasons that Christ walked this earth and did what he did was not to just teach us how to treat other people, but how to treat ourselves.
Hmm.
And so when we're having a bad day, when we're feeling grumpy, when we're feeling irritated, when we're feeling anxious because we're going into a new transfer. I was just talking to a missionary today and he just got news that he's getting transferred. And he's feeling anxious and worried about
Yeah,
it, like
absolutely. As you do. Yeah.
as you do.
Yeah.
So how, instead of like, I need to get rid of this anxiety, it shouldn't be here, we observe it. And then we learn how to like add and pour in just like so much love and compassion and talk to ourselves the same way like the Savior would be talking to us if he was here. My
Mm.
guess is he wouldn't be like, what's wrong with you? You must not be reading your scriptures enough or whatever. Or did you not get up on time? He'd probably be like, yeah, this makes sense. How can I help? I love you. And that's how we should be talking to ourselves. So that, and then I think the last thing, I mean, all of those programs, we kind of flesh all of this stuff out as far as like failure and relationships and joy and confidence. We flesh all of that out like way a lot. But as far as like the last kind of like main component, I think is how to feel. So we aren't good at feeling. And you might have just heard my dog bark. Um,
That's great.
we aren't good at feeling. In fact, I feel like most of society is designed to help us either avoid feeling
Yeah.
or distract ourselves from feeling. Or
Mm.
if we come up against something that feels like it might be uncomfortable, like a mission or like maybe our first date after the mission or something like that, we just like, never mind. I don't like that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's another really big component is we teach how to feel. And I just did a whole podcast about we all go around trying to feel better, right?
Mhm.
Like, and so on the mission, like when we're not feeling the way we want to, and then all of a sudden we're like, I need to feel better. Like, is
Mhm.
it scriptures? Is it temple? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? I need to feel better. When the answer isn't feeling better, the answer is getting better at feeling.
Hmm.
And when we can become so like full of compassion and love and then sort of carry anxiety with that
Mm.
together, that's where the power is. And so that's a lot what we do is like, okay, what does it actually look like? How do you be with yourself? How do you be compassionate with yourself when you're having these thoughts and having all of these feelings that you're just going to have because you're human? That's why we're here.
That makes so much sense, right? In theater, we talk a lot about the power of
Hmm.
right? And just absolutely, the whole time you were describing that, I was like, absolutely, it's just getting in the habit of adding more ands to our vocabulary. Like we can be a good missionary and have a lot of anxiety. We can be very compassionate to ourselves and still be trying to figure out how to be a better feeler, how to become better at feeling. And so, absolutely, just giving us, I think, so much of Christ's grace is learning how to speak to ourselves, just like you were talking about, with more compassion and love and more ands. Like just being able to accept this is what's going on in reality. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to change it. It just is. And let's just stop and embrace it for
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another and to consider is like some days I really don't like myself that much. Some days, like if we're all being really honest, some days we do have thoughts like I'm not good enough. I can't do this. It doesn't matter. I don't even know if I can stay here, right? I
Yeah.
don't even know if I can keep going. Those are not bad or wrong thoughts. Those are just thoughts that create feelings. And so it's interesting because sometimes even when I say stuff here, I worry that people use that against themselves. Like the ideal, right, is that 100% of the time we'd always show ourselves compassion. We won't.
Sure.
We
Sure.
just won't 100% of the time. Like the only person that did that 100% of the time was Jesus. I really
Absolutely.
believe he showed that for other people and for himself, by the way. Right.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so just understanding, like, okay, so this is a day where I don't really like myself. I don't have a lot of confidence. Okay. Hopefully it'll be better tomorrow. But then let's let's not make it wrong that we feel wrong.
Hmm. Yeah, normalizing that a little bit more, especially in a culture where I just remember as a missionary thinking like we have to go, go, go all the time. So just kind of learning to take that time to breathe for a second and say, you know what, today might not be my favorite day. I might not like myself a lot today. Um, And instead of just pushing that down and saying, but I can't think about that right now because we have this appointment with so and so or this dinner with so and so, just giving ourselves grace and saying the thought is just a thought. We can feel it for just a minute, and that's okay. Today is just a day.
Yeah. And I find it fascinating too. I was talking, so in this preparing missionary program, I have some returned missionary mentors that work in there, um,
Yeah.
that are teaching in there and helping me out in there. And we were on like a team meeting and he was like, well, how does this work? Because when we're on our missions, we want everyone to see that we're happy.
Hmm.
And I was like, but again, what is more, Isabella, let's think about it. What is more connecting? If I'm feeling like I'm missing my family, let's say, and I go to a lesson with you and I'm just like, everything's great. Everything's happy. Like I can be with my family forever. Like
Yep.
what is more connecting? That or me being like, listen, I've been gone from my mission now a while. And my family means so much to me. And I'm missing them today. And like, do you know what it's like to miss your family?
Mm.
And like being real and like being open to those feelings, being open to those emotions are actually connecting, not disconnecting.
Mm. That's a beautiful perspective. And a question I didn't anticipate, but one that's coming to mind is, what are your thoughts on what we could do better as even just a church culture to help normalize that with missionaries? I'm curious if you have any thoughts or experiences with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it starts just as things always do on an individual level.
Mm.
So it starts with the way that we are talking to our own missionaries. It starts with the way that we're talking to kids, like they're running a mission prep thing in our stake right now, and it starts with being real about what they're probably going to feel.
Yep.
Okay. And then being real and telling them one of my favorite things that I repeat often on the podcast is like to normalize, validate, and then repeat over and over. So
Mm.
a missionary calls home and they're like, oh, I just don't even know what to do. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't even know if I can do this. I don't even know if I can stay here. Normalize sounds like it makes so much sense that you feel that way. It makes so much sense that like that you have these thoughts
Mm.
and say things like, did you know most missionaries think about coming home at some point? That's actually true.
Wow.
So we normalize it. And we can even say, like, when I was on my mission, I thought about coming home too. See,
Yep.
that just like normalizes it. And then
Absolutely.
the validate part is, and it's okay.
Mm.
So the normalize is it makes sense. And the validate is it's okay. And so, like, I think we can do this like in mission leadership, like when let's say you're a district leader, right? And there's some sisters who are overwhelmed and aren't meeting their goals or whatever.
Yep.
Instead of being like, what's wrong with you? You shouldn't be anxious. You like, like discounting all of it.
Yeah.
We can say, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense that you're feeling this way. And it's okay that you are.
I feel like that would change mission cultures around the world to be able to learn how to validate and to normalize and repeat, right? Normalize, validate, and repeat in that way more often. Because absolutely, I feel like just even looking back personally, the moments in my mission where I was brave enough to tell somebody, hey, like I am struggling, or hey, like I actually have been thinking about going home, those moments where I finally was able to reach out to people and hear them say, like, you know what, me too. And we're still here. And it is hard sometimes, I'll give you that. And I understand.
Yeah.
To your point, exactly. Like that was the moment I felt the most seen and the most love from God as a missionary was, oh, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
normal. That's okay.
Yeah. And I think feeling that support from parents too, I think sometimes, especially I think parents who are so far away, right? And I
Mhm.
experienced this myself. Like my second son before COVID was serving in Australia, and it's literally on the other side of the earth.
Right. Can't get much further away. Yeah.
Much further away.
Yep.
And then when COVID started happening and you feel powerless, you
Yeah.
really do. And so those moments that you have with them, our tendency when someone's like, I'm not getting along with my companion, or like I'm thinking about coming home. I don't know if I can do this much longer. Our tendency is to be like, oh my gosh, no, you're fine, right? Or
Right.
even like if someone says, I feel like I'm a bad missionary. I feel like I'm not measuring up to this and this and this. Our tendency is to want to be like, no, no, totally, you are. And instead, like what missionaries hear, I think what children hear, even when we say, don't think that or don't feel that, is they
Mhm.
start to wonder, then there might be something wrong with me if I
Yeah.
do. But when we can say, just like you're saying, like, oh, if someone just tells me it's okay,
Mhm.
it's a completely different experience. You feel heard, you feel seen, you feel loved.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you. And what a great thing for honestly all of us to keep in mind. Not just when we're talking to missionaries, but to everybody and everything they're going through. But absolutely, as a church culture, thinking about what can we do to support missionaries? How do we help um, in our wards, the missionaries from our wards, in our family? That just seems like such a beautiful piece of advice. So thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I would just kind of love to double check and ask, are there any other skills or things that come to mind of, I wish every missionary had a little bit of a chance to learn more about this before, during, or after their mission that would help them? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Um, I mean, so if we're talking, like, I think one of the most powerful tools to learn um, is this like normalize, validate, repeat that we can do for other people is to learn to do that for ourselves.
Mm,
I just wrapped up 10 sessions with a missionary, and he was really man, he was struggling with like mission culture and um you know just and the way the mission culture was impacting him in particular is like he just kept feeling like I'll never measure up. And then of course, like we sort of feel like if we're not going to measure up, like why even try, kind of an idea.
yep.
And that is like I talked to him today and I was like, let's do a before and after. Like, what were you like when we first started talking? And he's like, yeah, I questioned myself. I compared myself. Like when I was having a bad day, I just thought that was wrong and I thought that was bad. And then now he's just like, I feel so empowered
Hmm.
that no matter what is going on outside of me and how everybody else is behaving, and whatever like rules are, whatever it is, like sometimes mission presidents will actually like put in some sort of rule that maybe doesn't make a lot of sense to you or something like that, right?
Sure,
But
absolutely.
whatever is going on, I know that I'm the creator of my experience, and the best way to do that is to normalize the feelings and thoughts that I'm having for myself and to validate for myself. I mean, I can hear it in my own head even for myself. Like, listen, Jenny, it's okay. If you're having a bad day, it's okay. You
Yeah,
know, maybe you
yeah.
don't like yourself that much today. Totally fine. It'll probably be better tomorrow. And so, really, that's the ultimate, I think. I think it's one of the reasons we're here on this earth is to learn how to do that, not just for other people, but for ourselves. Because, I mean, just think about the power you create within yourself to serve others when you're already good. Like when you know that in your hardest moments, you've got you and God's got you,
Hmm.
like it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty life-changing, right? I feel like that is kind of the good, ideally, right, the good news of the gospel. What these missionaries are out there sharing is, uh, yeah, we believe in a savior that has you, even when you don't feel like you have yourself. You can turn to him, and he wants to empower you. I love that word, to learn how to do that more for yourself. He's not just gonna leave you hanging there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, absolutely. I've had the opportunity to talk a little bit with some missionaries who came home early or unexpectedly.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, just as a life coach, what those sessions are like in particular, because I
Mhm.
think that would be very hard, um, to feel the weight of that decision to come home sometimes. I think we don't always talk about that as much. I'd be curious to hear what your experience has been with that and how that impacts the work that you do too.
Yeah, totally. So, like, it is different, right? A missionary who serves the entire time they were planning on is going to have a transition period. That's just going to be part of the process because you
Yeah.
are so different when you come home.
Yeah.
When we're coming home earlier than we were planning, so like if I picture a return missionary has a lot of emotions and thoughts to like unpack,
Yep.
uh, someone who comes home earlier than they were planning or expecting has a bigger suitcase to unpack. Not
Hmm.
because they should, not because I really don't believe like that that's a bad thing when people come home earlier than they were planning on. To me, I do believe that that was part of God's plan. Otherwise, they'd still be on their mission, right?
Yeah.
But just to help them see that, again, it's like helping them see their relationship with God and the way they see the world and the way they see themselves. That's a little bit bigger suitcase to unpack versus someone who felt like they had an amazing mission and they didn't struggle and everything was great and everything was amazing, although they have other things, right, that we have to sort of work through because maybe they come home and life isn't amazing afterwards. And so then they're like, wait, now what? I thought this was how it was going to go, right?
Right.
But I think I've worked with missionaries who've served 7 weeks. I've worked with missionaries who've served 7 months. I've worked with missionaries who were on sort of like they'll send them home for like a little mental health sort of respite for like 3 months and then go
Okay.
back out. So
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen anything like that, but um
I
I've
haven't seen anything particularly like that yet, but that does make a lot of sense. I've seen a lot of the transition from coming from a proselyting mission to a service mission and
yeah,
what that looks like. But yeah, yeah,
I've had that as well. And I've had missionaries who come home for that little 12-week respite and they just decide they're done
yeah.
or they transfer to service mission. So I think the biggest thing is that helps with this sort of an idea of coming home earlier than we were expecting is I think we have a lot of ideas about the mission being the very best place for us to grow,
Hmm.
change, and transform. And so when a missionary comes home earlier than they were expecting, it's sort of like they feel like they've let someone down. Like, I've let myself down. Now I can't grow, change, and transform. I've let my family down. Now I can't grow, change, and I've let God down. Now I can't grow, change, and transform. But what's actually true, and I know this because of the missionaries that I've worked with,
Yeah.
is the growth, change, and transformation that is asked of you when you come home earlier than you were expecting is miles harder than just if your mission went swimmingly the way you thought it was going to go.
Hmm.
And it's required of these missionaries in a succinct amount of time. So picture like maybe a transfer, like I figure by the end of this life, we all have to learn certain things, right? We have to learn certain things about God and the way he works, our heavenly parents, the way the world works, the way who we are,
Yeah.
our relationship to other people. And some of us are going to learn those things on the mission. And some of us, even though it's not maybe even what we wanted, are going to learn those things coming home earlier than we planned. And we're going to learn it in like, instead of learning it in 5 years, let's say in being a newlywed or something like that, we're
Yeah.
going to learn it in 5 months and really deep. And it's going to be heart wrenching and it's going to make us question ourselves and our relationship with God. And then we've learned it.
Hmm.
It's done. And I've had actual conversations with missionaries who came home earlier than they were planning or transferred to a service mission. And I say, don't you think if you were supposed to be on your mission still, you would be? And the answer is yes. Like, why do we as humans think like we can change God's plan?
Hmm.
We can't change God's plan. He's all powerful, all knowing, all loving, all feeling. So why do we think, oh, I messed up God's plan? It's just not a thing. It's always part of the plan. We're just going to learn these things in a short amount of time. I think of coming home. I talk about this on my podcast, the episode where I talk about coming home earlier than expected. It's really like a fast pass to learning those things in a short, intense amount of time. But you might need more help. Really, you might need a lot more help and support because it is a bigger suitcase.
That makes so much sense. I feel like even just the missionaries that I've talked to, that came home whenever they did, but especially if they came home earlier than expected, whether it was for COVID or for mental health or physical health or any other reason, um, there does seem to be this extra layer of weight, right? There's this extra sense of I messed it up. I
Right.
failed, right? And yet, um, I feel like something I continue to learn from my mission and that I hear echoed in so many of these interviews and things that I've had the chance to do is learning to accept, but I don't have enough power to throw off God's plan. We'd like to think that, right? We'd like to think that we're that powerful or
Right.
faithful, whatever the insert your
Right.
favorite adjective here that we wish we were, but we're not and we feel bad about. But absolutely learning to accept all the time that God is truly still in control, even when we would like to think or wish we were in control. And that's a huge mind shift as well. And that takes time to learn
Hmm.
as well. But you do get this fast pass experience. I like love how you said that to learning that lesson, I think, when you are asked to go through that experience of coming home early and what that looks like. So
Sure. Or any sort of like difficulty or trial, right? After, like, that's actually why we're here, is to experience those kinds of things. And sometimes it's going to be on the mission, and sometimes it's going to be right after the mission, and sometimes it's going to be when we're newly married, and sometimes it's going to be when we have our first baby, and sometimes like we will learn what we need to learn to become like our heavenly parents. That's why we're here.
hmm. So, following that same line of thinking, something I've asked a lot of missionaries as I've interviewed them is, when do you feel like the mission ended? Like
Interesting.
really? Yeah. So I'd be curious to hear, like, what are your thoughts on that? When does the mission end? When is it over?
Such a fascinating question. I think it depends a lot on when you are able, and it's going to be probably a different timetable for everybody, but when you're able to sort of make peace with it and come to a um sort of like uh ownership of it, that it was your experience, that it was meant for you, that God had your back the whole time, and 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 that it's all good. I have worked with return missionaries who've been suffering for like 3 years, just trying to like either make sense of their mission or just dealing with the sort of the ideas and the ramifications from the mission and things like that. Um, so as far as like the actual like mission and the way we think about it, um, I think as soon as you're able to like sort of like, I don't, this maybe sounds dramatic, but like make peace with it and like send it on its way,
Mm,
um, and let it be what it was. As far as like what is a mission, and what, like, when does that end? I think our mission is twofold: to learn what we need to learn while we're here to become like our heavenly parents. And sometimes it's gonna be gut wrenching and soul searching. Um, so that, and then of course to love. Um, I have a lot of preparing missionaries who are like, oh, I don't know enough, and I'll never compare to the missionaries that are serving in my ward, and I'll never like measure up. And how can I ever know enough about the scriptures? And the good news is that's not even the point.
mm,
The point is to love. You're out there to love like God loves and like Christ loves, and to do that for other people, but to do it for yourself too.
awesome. That puts a whole new meaning on what is the mission, right? If the mission is to love others and yourself, yeah, that's a whole new perspective to think about. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
I think kind of similarly along those lines, I would be curious to ask, a lot of times I ask the question like, who or what is a missionary? So for you, who is a missionary?
Yeah. I mean, there's like our formal call, right? That like my nephew got his last night. He's going to Virginia. So that's super fun.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's awesome.
Um, interestingly, where he was born. He's going to be serving in the mission where he was born,
Really?
yeah, like years ago when he was born. And they don't live there anymore, but kind of
Wow.
funny when those things like work out like that. So
Yeah, it's almost like there's a bigger plan or something.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but beyond that, yeah, like if we think about like our purpose or our mission just here on this earth is I do feel like that is what it is learning how to love God, learning how to love the people that we interact with unconditionally, by the way, not like they need to be this certain way and they should behave this certain way, but like, okay, I see what's going on for them. I understand it. It's okay. And I love them. But then also being able to do that for ourselves. That's what I feel like my mission is to teach people that and to help them with that. So,
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And it's very cool to hear you talk about, right, what your mission is and personalizing it. Like I think you were talking about earlier, when you can personalize it and even kind of make peace with it, I think is what you were saying earlier. Yeah, that's such a beautiful answer, and hopefully one that so many people get to understand as they come closer to God. You know, the mission may not just be for an 18 or 24-month period or whatever it is. It's whenever you have figured out what God's mission is for you.
mm,
That's beautiful. Thank
mm,
you.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked so much today about um, how you can't feel sadness or anxiety or hardship without feeling joy, and vice versa. We need both of those. So sometimes when I ask these interviews, I ask missionaries, what was something hard, and then also what was something beautiful or spiritual. And maybe upon thinking about this, maybe that's the wrong way to ask that question because I think they're often intertwined. But if we were to ask that question, I'd love to hear what are some of the joyful experiences you have found on this mission that you are on as a mission coach? When are some of those joyful moments for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way I talk about joy is encompassed within joy. So is both happiness and sadness. I think sometimes we think of um I think as members of the church we have a hard time like describing joy even. Like what is joy? And we're like, well, it's an eternal happiness or it's like a higher version of happiness.
Right.
But what I think finally tipped me off is in the scriptures when it talks about a fullness of joy, which is happiness and sadness, like we're describing here, is without one, there is no other. And so joy to me is the surrender to God's plan where there's both sets of emotions, where Christ has made up for all of it, and where we have the amazing gift to navigate this life and feel all of it. And that is joy. And so even in moments of sadness, that's why we can be in moments of sadness, like when we have a family member pass away or when like we don't meet our goal or whatever it is on the mission is and or maybe we're older than we want to be and we're still not married or whatever it is that we can have joy, and that joy comes from an understanding of the plan. It doesn't come from situations. It comes from an understanding of the overarching plan, which always from the beginning, from the council in heaven, included happiness and sadness, both. Since the Garden of Eden, since Adam and Eve were thrust out of the Garden of Eden, included both happiness and sadness. So if I was to describe, we hear missionaries a lot say, oh, how do you feel joy? How do you feel joy? How do you feel joy? And to me, when I see that, that's like, let me tell you some of the stuff where I felt sad. And let me tell you some of the stuff where I felt happy, because all of that together is joy to me, knowing
Wow.
that I'm living out the plan. And so let's see, times when I felt sad. Um, I do wish I had back. I remember I was working with a returned missionary and she was telling me how um she felt really hurt by some of the ways she was treated with a district leader. And I was a pretty new coach and I feel like I wasn't as compassionate as maybe I could have been with her. So I think back to that and wish I could have that moment back. That makes me sad. It makes me sad when I hear struggles that missionaries have to go through, knowing that it could be better for them. I feel sad when I get emails from moms telling me like how their missionaries are suffering. That makes me sad. And I know that that is part of why we're here. Times I felt happy. I felt so happy today after I wrapped up the 10 sessions with that or with that missionary. I like if I could have a picture of a before and after, he's not even the same kid. And so that seeing that impact, and it's not even me, right? It's the Spirit, it's Christ, it's all of those like God helping him change the way he sees himself and being open to changing the way he sees himself and the way he has power and creative ability over his life, his whole life, and the way he sees it. It's nothing I do. I just ask questions and I just help him see what's going on in his brain. But those times make me really happy because I'm like, oh, this matters. Like this is really important. And just seeing the shift in him. Before I said, when we first started working together, he was like, I might go home. I don't know if I can do this anymore. And 10 sessions later, I did ask him, I was like, do you ever think about going home anymore? And he was like, I mean, it pops in my head sometimes. I'll be like, maybe we should go home, right? That's just his brain, his problem-solving brain.
Right, back to that
Yeah,
concept.
the
Yeah.
human
Yep.
experience. Yep. But he was like, but when it pops in, I just tell myself, but why would I?
Mm.
Like he understands that he's the creator. He understands how empowered he is. He's empowered himself to make decisions, to make the mission what he wants it to be. He's not at the mercy of it anymore. He is the creator of it. And that really makes me happy.
That's so beautiful. And it's so neat to hear your testimony, Jenny, too. You just have such a testimony of an empowering God. And I
Mhm.
think that's not always maybe a quality of Christ that we think about.
Mhm.
Um, we think about him being powerful, but sometimes I think we forget, as we've talked about today, just how much Christ wants to teach us about what it means to be a creator, to be empowered, and to take that. So, what a great opportunity in your personal mission to help someone feel the empowerment of Christ. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, you bet.
I think I had the chance to ask most of the primary questions that I wanted to ask you today and so many other great follow-up questions, but I would just love to ask, is there anything else that while we were talking came to your minds that you wanted to circle back to or share, or anything else that you wish more missionaries had the chance to think about or know about that we haven't talked about yet today?
Yeah. I mean, one little thing comes to mind, which is Christ and our heavenly parents want us to feel empowered. And what I think we sometimes forget is that we are theirs.
Mm.
Like we are literally there, have their DNA in us. And so sometimes we think, oh, I don't have, the ability to believe like that I'm powerful, or I shouldn't believe that I'm a creator, or I shouldn't believe like that I have the ability to create the mission I want, or to do the things that I want to do. But it's just mind blowing to me. One of the things I love thinking about is like our heavenly parents gave us everything we need when they created us to create whatever experience we want to have. They gave us minds and hearts and bodies to create whatever. Like you and I, it's just crazy, right? Like we created
Yeah.
some emails, then we
Yep.
created this call, and now I'm gonna create a podcast.
Yep.
all just with our minds and our hearts. We don't need to question ourselves. I don't think they are. They just love watching us do what we do.
Thank you so much. That is just what a perfect way to end and to summarize everything that we've talked about today. So thank you so much, Jenny. This was such a pleasure, and I could just so tangibly feel your love and Christ's love through you for these sweet missionaries that you work with. So thank you. I'm super excited to add this story of missionary work into a missionary play. So thank you.
Well, it was so fun to hang out with you, and thanks for giving me a chance to like reflect on these things and to share my heart. And so it's been an awesome conversation, and I can't wait to see where the play goes. So thanks for
Thanks.
being here.
Absolutely. Yeah, such a pleasure. Thank you.
Serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can present a unique set of challenges, and many of those challenges you might not even see coming. So you're going to want a unique set of solutions. It's easier than you think to overcome worry and anxiety, serve the successful mission you've always dreamed of, and navigate your post-mission experience with confidence. That is why I created some amazing free goodies that I'm sharing in my show notes. Maybe you'll want to grab the free training for preparing missionaries, my video course for RMs, or maybe you and I should hop on a free strategy call. If you're ready to take your preparedness to serve or your preparedness to come home to the next level, then go grab one of those freebies. And in the meantime, no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, just know that Jenny, the LDS mission coach, is thinking about you every single day.